Why does the universe have 62 layers? Introduction and the greatest journey ever conceived. Close your eyes for a moment. Actually, keep them open because you need to watch this, but imagine with me. Imagine you could shrink yourself down, smaller and smaller, until the atoms in your fingernail looked like solar systems. Then imagine shrinking further still, until those atoms themselves became vast landscapes, their components stretching out before you like continents. Now flip that around. Imagine growing larger, your body expanding past mountains, past planets, past entire star systems, until galaxies themselves became mere specks of light scattered across your palm like grains of cosmic sand. What you have just imagined, that impossible journey from the incomprehensibly small to the unfathomably large, spans exactly 62 orders of magnitude. 62. That number might not mean much to you right now, but by the end of this exploration, it will represent the single most profound measurement in all of science. It is the distance between the smallest meaningful length in the universe and the edge of everything we can observe. It is the ruler by which we measure existence itself. Here is what makes this even more extraordinary. You exist almost precisely in the middle of this cosmic ruler. Not at one extreme or the other, but balanced right there at the center of all that is measurable. Your body, roughly 1 to 2 meters tall, sits at the mathematical midpoint between the Planck length, that quantum foam where space and time themselves become meaningless, and the observable universe, that sphere of light stretching 93 billion light-years across that represents the absolute limit of human knowledge. Think about that for a moment. Out of all the possible sizes something could be in this universe, conscious life emerged at the exact midpoint of the scale. Coincidence? Mathematical necessity? Some deep principle of the cosmos we have yet to understand? These are the questions that have driven physicists, philosophers, and dreamers mad for centuries. Tonight, we are going to embark on the greatest journey ever conceived, not through space in the traditional sense, but through scale itself. We will begin at the smallest possible measurement, down where the very concepts of length and time dissolve into quantum uncertainty, and we will travel upward through 62 orders of magnitude until we reach the edge of the observable universe. Along the way, we will encounter quarks and leptons, atoms and molecules, bacteria and human beings, planets and stars, galaxies and superclusters, until finally we arrive at the cosmic web itself, that vast scaffolding of matter that holds everything together. Each order of magnitude we traverse represents a tenfold increase in size. When you move from 1 centimeter to 10 centimeters, you have crossed 1 order of magnitude. When you move from 1 meter to 10 meters, another. This exponential scaling is the only way the human mind can even begin to comprehend the range of sizes present in our universe. If we tried to represent these scales linearly, if we tried to draw a line where 1 millimeter represented 1 Planck length, that line would need to extend far, far beyond the edge of the observable universe just to reach the size of a single atom. The universe, it seems, is recursive. It contains patterns within patterns, structures within structures, each layer building upon the one below it to create something new, something emergent, something that could never have been predicted from the properties of its components alone. Protons and neutrons combine to form atomic nuclei, but nothing about a single proton predicts the existence of gold or uranium. Atoms combine to form molecules, but nothing about a single carbon atom predicts the existence of DNA. Cells combine to form organisms, but nothing about a single neuron predicts the emergence of consciousness. Stars combine to form galaxies, but nothing about a single star predicts the existence of spiral arms and galactic bulges. This is the magic of scale. At each level, new physics emerges. New rules take over. New phenomena appear that simply did not exist at smaller scales. A quark knows nothing of chemistry. An atom knows nothing of biology. A cell knows nothing of economics. A planet knows nothing of galactic dynamics. Yet all of these phenomena are equally real, equally fundamental, equally part of the grand architecture of existence. The ancient Greeks sensed this truth without having the mathematics to express it. Democritus imagined atoms as the smallest building blocks of matter, but he could never have guessed that atoms themselves would prove to be almost entirely empty space, with nuclei thousands of times smaller than the electron clouds surrounding them. The medieval scholars who debated how many angels could dance on the head of a pin were unknowingly probing the question of physical limits, of whether there existed some smallest possible space below which the very concept of location became meaningless. It took until the 20th century for Max Planck to provide the answer. Using only the fundamental constants of nature, the speed of light, the gravitational constant, and the quantum of action that would later bear his name, Planck derived a length scale of approximately 1.6 times 10 to the negative 35th meters. This is the Planck length, and it represents the boundary beyond which our current physics can say nothing meaningful. Below this scale, the concepts of space and time themselves become undefined. The smooth fabric of space-time that Einstein described gives way to something else entirely, something we have taken to calling quantum foam, though that name conceals far more than it reveals. At the opposite extreme sits the observable universe, that sphere of ancient light centered on every point in the cosmos. The universe has been expanding for 13.8 billion years, but because that expansion has been accelerating, the most distant objects we can see have now moved 46 billion light-years away from us. Multiply that by 2 for the full diameter, and you get 93 billion light-years, or roughly 8.8 times 10 to the 26th meters. From the Planck length to the observable universe, 62 orders of magnitude, 62 factors of 10, 62 layers of reality stacked one upon another like some cosmic wedding cake. And you, reading these words or hearing this voice, exist in the middle layer. Not too hot, not too cold, not too big, not too small. You are the Goldilocks observer, perched at the exact scale where atoms have arranged themselves into patterns complex enough to contemplate their own existence. If you were the size of a quark, the universe would seem infinite and featureless, a void of quantum fluctuations with no structure whatsoever. If you were the size of a galaxy, individual stars would be invisible, planets undetectable, life inconceivable. It is only here, at the human scale, that the universe becomes legible. This is not to suggest that humans are special in some cosmic sense. The same mathematics would apply to any conscious observer anywhere in the universe. Whatever form alien intelligence might take, it would necessarily exist at roughly our scale, because that is where chemistry becomes possible, where information can be processed, where the universe can, in some sense, know itself. We are not the center of the cosmos, but we may be the center of what is knowable about the cosmos. So let us begin our journey. Let us descend first into the quantum realm, where particles dance according to rules no human intuition could ever have predicted. Let us climb back up through atoms and molecules, through the intricate machinery of life, through planets and stars, until we reach the cosmic web itself. Along the way, I will show you wonders that would have been inconceivable to any generation before ours. I will show you how the very smallest things in the universe connect to the very largest, how the properties of quarks determine the architecture of galaxies, how the constants of nature conspired to produce a cosmos capable of contemplating itself. This is the story of scale. This is the story of everything. And it begins at a place so small that even the word small loses all meaning. Welcome to the 62 layers of reality. Let me set the stage for this journey by explaining what we mean by orders of magnitude. An order of magnitude is a factor of 10. When scientists say something differs by one order of magnitude, they mean it differs by a factor of 10, either 10 times larger or 10 times smaller. 2 orders of magnitude means a factor of 100. 3 orders of magnitude means a factor of 1,000. This logarithmic scaling is essential for comprehending the range of sizes in our universe, because linear comparisons simply cannot convey the true scope of the differences involved. Consider this. The difference in size between an atom and the observable universe is not like the difference between a grain of sand and a beach ball. It is more like the difference between a grain of sand and a beach ball, repeated 50 times over. Each step in that repetition spans multiple orders of magnitude, and each step represents a qualitative change in the phenomena that dominate at that scale. This is why we cannot simply visualize the universe as a collection of differently sized objects. We must think in terms of scale regimes, each with its own physics, its own structures, its own wonders. The universe we inhabit is not scale invariant. It looks different at different scales. The laws of physics may be the same everywhere, but the phenomena they produce depend critically on size. At the smallest scales, quantum uncertainty dominates, and particles exist as probability clouds rather than definite objects. At intermediate scales, the classical physics of everyday experience takes over, and objects have definite positions, velocities, and trajectories. At the largest scales, gravity dominates, curving space-time and shaping the evolution of cosmic structures over billions of years. Your everyday experience takes place within a narrow band of this cosmic spectrum, perhaps 10 orders of magnitude from the smallest things you can see to the largest. A grain of sand is about 1/10 of a millimeter. A mountain is about 10 kilometers high. That is a range of about 8 orders of magnitude. The observable universe spans 62 orders of magnitude, almost 8 times the range of your daily experience. Most of reality lies beyond your senses, accessible only through instruments and mathematics. Throughout this journey, I will try to give you tangible comparisons, analogies that anchor these abstract numbers to things you can imagine. But be warned, at the extremes, analogies fail. There is nothing in human experience that corresponds to the Planck length or the observable universe. These scales are genuinely alien, as foreign to human intuition as the experiences of bats or beetles. The best we can do is approach them through mathematics and trust that the equations describe something real, even if we cannot picture it. So take a deep breath. Clear your mind of everyday concerns. Open yourself to wonder. We are about to embark on the greatest journey imaginable, a journey that will take us from the limits of smallness to the limits of largeness, from the quantum foam, where reality flickers in and out of existence, to the cosmic web, where galaxies are mere nodes in a universe-spanning network. This journey will change how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you understand your place in the cosmos. Are you ready? Then let us begin. The quantum scale, the Planck length, and quantum foam. At the foundation of existence, where our journey must necessarily begin, lies a realm so alien to human experience that even our most brilliant physicists can only describe it through mathematics, never through intuition. This is the Planck scale, named for Max Planck, the German physicist who, in 1899, realized that the fundamental constants of nature define a natural system of units that owes nothing to human convention. Planck was working on the problem of blackbody radiation, the puzzle of how hot objects emit light. In the process, he stumbled upon a constant of nature, now called Planck's constant, that would later become the foundation of quantum mechanics. But Planck noticed something even more profound. By combining his constant with the speed of light and Newton's gravitational constant, He could derive natural units of length, time, and mass that depended only on the properties of the universe itself, not on arbitrary human choices like the length of a king's foot or the weight of a particular bar of metal in Paris. The Planck length works out to approximately 1.6 times 10 to the negative 35th meters. To give you some sense of how impossibly small this is, consider the following. If you took a dot the width of a human hair, about 1/10 of a millimeter, and magnified it to the size of the observable universe, all 93 billion light years of it, the Planck length would still be smaller than that original dot. The Planck length is to an atomic nucleus what the atomic nucleus is to a city. It is smaller relative to an atom than an atom is relative to the entire solar system. But the Planck length is not just small. It represents something far more fundamental. It is the scale at which our current understanding of physics breaks down completely. At this scale, the two great pillars of 20th century physics, quantum mechanics and general relativity, come into irreconcilable conflict. Quantum mechanics tells us that at small scales, the universe becomes fuzzy, uncertain, probabilistic. General relativity tells us that mass and energy curve the fabric of space-time. At the Planck scale, these two descriptions crash into each other and produce nonsense. Consider what happens when you try to measure something at the Planck scale. According to quantum mechanics, measuring the position of a particle with greater precision requires probing it with higher energy particles. This is the essence of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. To see something small, you need light with a wavelength smaller than the object you are trying to see, and shorter wavelengths mean higher energies. But according to general relativity, concentrating enough energy in a small enough space creates a black hole. At the Planck scale, the energy required to measure position precisely would create a black hole whose event horizon would swallow the measurement itself. This is not some abstract theoretical concern. It is a fundamental limit on what can be known. Below the Planck scale, the very concepts of position and time cease to have operational meaning. You cannot ask where something is located at a scale smaller than the Planck length, because the question itself becomes incoherent. Space and time, as we understand them, simply do not exist at this scale. What does exist? This is one of the deepest unsolved problems in physics. John Wheeler, the visionary American physicist who named black holes and coined the phrase "it from bit," suggested in 1955 that at the Planck scale, space-time might have a foamy, turbulent structure. He imagined the smooth fabric of space-time giving way to a seething chaos of quantum fluctuations, tiny wormholes and black holes popping in and out of existence. The geometry of space itself becoming random and undefined. He called this quantum foam. Modern theoretical physics has elaborated on Wheeler's vision without definitively confirming or refuting it. String theory, one of the leading candidates for a quantum theory of gravity, suggests that at the Planck scale, what we perceive as point-like particles are actually tiny vibrating strings of energy. These strings, each about 1 Planck length in size, vibrate in different patterns, and each pattern corresponds to a different type of particle. An electron is one pattern of vibration. A quark is another. A photon is yet another. The entire zoo of fundamental particles would emerge from the various vibrational modes of these one-dimensional objects. String theory also suggests that at the Planck scale, space has more than 3 dimensions. The mathematics of string theory only works consistently in 10 or 11 space-time dimensions. The 6 or 7 extra dimensions beyond our familiar 3 spatial dimensions plus time would be curled up at the Planck scale, too small to detect with any current or foreseeable technology. They would form tiny geometric shapes called Calabi-Yau manifolds at every point in space, invisible to us but essential to the underlying physics. An alternative approach called loop quantum gravity suggests that space itself might be quantized at the Planck scale. Just as light comes in discrete packets called photons, space might come in discrete units called spin networks. According to this theory, there is literally a smallest possible piece of space, and the smooth spacetime of general relativity emerges only as an approximation when many of these quantum units are combined, much as the smooth surface of water emerges from the collective behavior of trillions of individual molecules. We do not yet know which of these theories, if any, is correct. The Planck scale lies so far beyond our experimental reach that we may never be able to test these ideas directly. The Large Hadron Collider at CERN, the most powerful particle accelerator ever built, can probe distances of about 10 to the negative 19 meters. That is still 100 million billion times larger than the Planck length. To probe the Planck scale directly with a particle accelerator would require a machine as large as the galaxy. But nature provides hints. Observations of gamma-ray bursts, the most energetic explosions in the universe, can test whether space has a grainy structure at very small scales. If space-time is quantized, different wavelengths of light should travel at slightly different speeds through the quantum foam, like different-sized balls moving through a bag of marbles. The longest observations have found no such effect, suggesting that space is smoothed down to scales at least 1,000 times smaller than the nucleus of an atom. But this is still vastly larger than the Planck length. The jury remains out. What we can say with confidence is that the Planck length represents the boundary of the knowable. It is the edge of the map, the point where physics writes, "Here be dragons." Below this scale, new physics must take over, physics we do not yet possess. The Planck length is not just small. It is the smallest that means anything. It is the first layer of our 62-layer universe, the foundation upon which all else is built. And here is the thing that should keep you up at night. The entire observable universe, all 93 billion light-years of it, with its 2 trillion galaxies and its 10 to the 24th stars, was once compressed into a space far smaller than a single proton. In the first 10 to the negative 43rd seconds after the Big Bang, the Planck time, the entire cosmos was itself a Planck scale fluctuation. The largest thing we know emerged from the smallest thing that can be. The 62 orders of magnitude we are about to traverse were once packed into a single quantum of space. The story of the universe is the story of how that speck became everything. From this quantum foam, from this seething chaos at the foundation of reality, emerged the first true structures of our universe. They are the fundamental particles, the quarks and leptons that will become the building blocks of matter. Let us climb one layer higher and meet them. The quantum scale, quarks, leptons, and the fundamental particles. As we ascend from the Planck scale, still deep in the quantum realm, but now at distances where physics becomes slightly less mysterious, we encounter the first genuine structures of the universe, the fundamental particles. These are the elementary building blocks from which everything else is made, the letters of the cosmic alphabet from which all words, sentences, and stories are constructed. The current best theory of fundamental particles is called the Standard Model. It is not a modest name, and the theory does not disappoint. The Standard Model describes 61 elementary particles organized into precise mathematical patterns and explains 3 of the 4 fundamental forces of nature with stunning accuracy. It has predicted the existence of particles before they were discovered, calculated their properties to 12 decimal places, and withstood every experimental test thrown at it for over 50 years. At its heart are 2 families of matter particles, quarks and leptons. Both are fermions, meaning they have a property called spin that comes in half-integer values. This distinguishes them from bosons, the force-carrying particles, which have integer spin. The difference is profound. Fermions obey the Pauli exclusion principle, meaning no two identical fermions can occupy the same quantum state. This is why matter has structure, why electrons arrange themselves in shells around atomic nuclei, rather than all collapsing into the same state. Bosons, by contrast, can pile up in the same state indefinitely. This is why lasers work, why superconductors conduct without resistance, why the universe has the texture it does. There are 6 types of quarks, arranged in 3 pairs or generations. The first generation contains the up quark and the down quark. These are the quarks that make up ordinary matter. Protons consist of 2 up quarks and 1 down quark. Neutrons consist of 1 up quark and 2 down quarks. Every atom you have ever seen, every rock and tree and star, is made of up and down quarks combined with electrons. The second generation contains the charm quark and the strange quark. These are heavier copies of the up and down quarks, unstable and short-lived, produced only in high-energy collisions like those in particle accelerators or cosmic ray showers. The third generation contains the top quark and the bottom quark, heavier still. The top quark is the heaviest fundamental particle known, with a mass nearly as great as an entire gold atom. It decays so quickly that it never has time to form bound states with other quarks. Why 3 generations? Why not 2, or 4, or 17? This is one of the great unsolved mysteries of physics. The Standard Model does not explain the number of generations. It simply accepts it as a fact of nature. Some physicists suspect that a deeper theory, perhaps string theory, will eventually explain this pattern. Others wonder if there might be a 4th generation waiting to be discovered. The Large Hadron Collider has placed tight limits on this possibility, but the question remains open. Quarks have a property called color charge that has nothing to do with actual colors. It is an abstract quantum number that determines how quarks interact through the strong force. There are 3 color charges: red, green, and blue. Antiquarks carry anticolor charges: anti-red, anti-green, and anti-blue. The strong force, mediated by particles called gluons, binds quarks together into larger composite particles called hadrons. The force has a remarkable property called confinement. Isolated quarks cannot exist. The force between quarks grows stronger as they separate, like a spring that becomes harder to stretch the more you pull it. If you try to pull 2 quarks apart, eventually it becomes energetically favorable to create a new quark-antiquark pair from the vacuum, leaving you with 2 bound systems instead of 2 free quarks. This is why you have never seen a free quark and never will. Quarks are permanently imprisoned within protons, neutrons, and other hadrons. It is only at temperatures exceeding several trillion degrees, temperatures that existed in the first microsecond after the Big Bang, and that can be recreated briefly in heavy ion collisions at particle accelerators, that quarks can roam free in a state called quark-gluon plasma. Experiments at the Relativistic Heavy Ion Collider in New York and the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland have created this primordial state of matter and studied its properties. It behaves almost like a perfect fluid, with virtually no viscosity, flowing more smoothly than any substance ever measured. Alongside quarks, the Standard Model contains 6 leptons, also arranged in 3 generations. The first generation contains the electron and the electron neutrino. The electron is the particle that orbits atomic nuclei, that flows through wires as electrical current, that makes chemistry possible. It has a mass about 1,800 times smaller than a proton and carries a negative electrical charge. The electron neutrino is its ghostly partner, electrically neutral and nearly massless, interacting so weakly with matter that trillions pass through your body every second without disturbing a single atom. The second generation contains the muon and the muon neutrino. The muon is essentially a heavy electron, with the same charge but about 200 times the mass. It is unstable, decaying into an electron and two neutrinos with a half-life of about 2 microseconds. Muons are produced in cosmic ray showers and rain down on Earth constantly. About 10,000 muons pass through each square meter of Earth's surface every minute. The third generation contains the tau and the tau neutrino, heavier still. The tau is about 3,500 times the mass of the electron, the heaviest lepton known. Unlike quarks, leptons do not experience the strong force. They carry no color charge. Electrons and their heavier cousins interact through the electromagnetic force and the weak force. Neutrinos interact only through the weak force and gravity, making them almost invisible to ordinary matter. A neutrino could pass through a wall of lead several light years thick without interacting. This makes neutrinos extremely difficult to detect, but also makes them excellent cosmic messengers, carrying information from deep inside stars and supernovae that no other particle could convey. The masses of these particles span an extraordinary range. The electron neutrino has a mass too small to measure directly, less than 1 electron volt. The top quark has a mass of about 170 billion electron volts. This is a ratio of more than 100 billion to 1. Why such a huge range? Again, the standard model offers no explanation. The masses are free parameters, numbers we must measure experimentally and feed into the theory. Some deeper theory must eventually explain their values, but we do not yet know what that theory is. The sizes of these particles are even more mysterious. As far as we can tell, quarks and leptons are point-like. They have no internal structure, no spatial extent. Experiments at the Large Hadron Collider have probed their structure down to scales of about 10 to the negative 19 meters, roughly a 10,000th the diameter of a proton, and found nothing. They appear to be mathematical points, zero-dimensional objects embedded in three-dimensional space. This is deeply strange. How can something with no size have mass? How can point-like objects interact with each other through forces? These questions lead us back to quantum field theory, where particles are understood not as tiny balls, but as excitations of underlying fields that permeate all of space. But for our purposes, ascending through the layers of scale, we can note that the fundamental particles represent the first rung of the ladder above the Planck scale. They are the smallest objects with definite properties, the first things we can describe with confidence. They exist at scales between 10 to the negative 18 and 10 to the negative 20 meters, still incomprehensibly small by human standards, but already 10 to the 15th to 10 to the 17 times larger than the Planck length. From these particles, from these quarks and leptons interacting through the fundamental forces, will emerge everything else. But before we continue our ascent, we must understand the forces that govern their interactions. The universe operates through 4 fundamental forces, each carried by its own set of bosons. The electromagnetic force is carried by photons, massless particles of light that travel at 299,792 kilometers per second. Every time you see, every time your phone receives a signal, every time an electron remains bound to an atomic nucleus, the electromagnetic force is at work. Its range is infinite, but its strength diminishes with the square of distance. The weak nuclear force is carried by W and Z bosons, massive particles that were predicted theoretically before being discovered at CERN in 1983. This force is responsible for radioactive decay, for the process by which neutrons transform into protons, for the fusion reactions that power the sun. Its range is vanishingly small, only about 10 to the negative 18 meters, 1,000 times smaller than a proton. Yet without the weak force, stars could not shine and elements could not transmute. The strong nuclear force is carried by gluons, 8 different massless particles that bind quarks together. Unlike photons, gluons carry color charge themselves, which means they interact with each other as well as with quarks. This self-interaction is responsible for the strange properties of the strong force. Its increasing strength at larger distances, its confinement of quarks within hadrons, its asymptotic freedom at very high energies where quarks behave almost as free particles. Gravity, the fourth force, has resisted all attempts at quantum description. We know there should be a particle called the graviton, a massless spin-2 boson that carries the gravitational force, but we have never detected one and have no consistent quantum theory that includes it. This is the great unsolved problem of theoretical physics. How to reconcile quantum mechanics with general relativity, how to describe gravity at the quantum level. The forces have wildly different strengths. If we set the strong force equal to 1, then the electromagnetic force is about 137 times weaker, the weak force is about 1,000,000 times weaker than that, and gravity is about 10 to the 39th times weaker than the strong force. Gravity is so weak that the electromagnetic repulsion between two protons vastly exceeds their gravitational attraction. Yet gravity dominates on cosmic scales because it has infinite range and only one sign. All masses attract. The strong and weak forces operate only at subatomic distances, while electromagnetism averages out because matter contains equal amounts of positive and negative charge. Only gravity remains to shape the cosmos. The interplay of these forces at the quantum scale determines everything that happens at larger scales. Chemistry is just applied electromagnetism. Nuclear physics is just applied quantum chromodynamics. Stellar physics is just applied nuclear physics. Cosmology is just applied gravitation. The reductionist program of physics has been spectacularly successful. A handful of fundamental laws explain phenomena across 62 orders of magnitude. Yet emergence remains mysterious. Nothing about the Standard Model predicts that quarks will form protons that will form atoms that will form molecules that will form cells that will form conscious beings who will discover the Standard Model. The laws of physics are necessary, but not sufficient. They constrain what can happen, but do not determine what will happen. The universe, following fixed rules, has produced ever more complex structures, climaxing, as far as we know, in minds capable of understanding those rules. The next layer up brings us to the composite particles, the protons and neutrons that will form atomic nuclei. Let us continue our ascent. The atomic scale, protons, neutrons, and the atomic nucleus. Climbing further from the quantum depths, we arrive at a scale where structure begins to emerge. Here, roughly 10 to the negative 15 meters, we find the first composite objects in nature, the protons and neutrons that will become the hearts of atoms. This is the femtometer scale, 1,000,000 times larger than the realm of quarks, yet still 100,000 times smaller than an atom itself. A proton is not a simple object. It contains 3 valence quarks, 2 up quarks with electric charge plus 2/3 each, and 1 down quark with charge minus 1/3, for a total charge of plus 1. But this picture, while useful, is vastly oversimplified. The proton is actually a seething quantum mechanical storm. In addition to the 3 valence quarks, it contains a constantly fluctuating sea of virtual quarks and antiquarks, popping in and out of existence according to the uncertainty principle. It contains gluons, the carriers of the strong force, which themselves carry color charge and can split into quark-antiquark pairs or emit other gluons. More than half the proton's mass comes not from its quarks, which are surprisingly light, but from the energy of the gluon field binding them together. This is Einstein's famous equation in action. E equals mc squared means that energy has mass, and the binding energy of the strong force contributes most of the proton's weight. The size of a proton is about 8.8 times 10 to the negative 16 meters, or roughly 0.88 femtometers. This number, known as the proton charge radius, was recently the subject of a scientific mystery. Different experiments gave different values, differing by about 4%. This proton radius puzzle sparked years of investigation and led to improved experimental techniques. The discrepancy now appears to be resolved, with the smaller value being correct, but it illustrated how even basic properties of familiar particles can hold surprises. A neutron is similar in structure to a proton, but with different quark content, 1 up quark and 2 down quarks, giving a total charge of 0. The neutron is slightly heavier than the proton, by about 1.3 megaelectronvolts, or roughly 0.14%. This tiny mass difference has cosmic significance. Because the neutron is heavier, a free neutron is unstable. It decays into a proton, an electron, and an antineutrino with a half-life of about 10 minutes. But inside an atomic nucleus, bound to protons by the strong force, neutrons can be stable. This is why atoms exist. If protons were heavier than neutrons, they would decay instead, and there would be no hydrogen in the universe, no stars, no chemistry, no life. The strong force that binds quarks into protons and neutrons has a residual effect that extends beyond these particles. Just as the electromagnetic force between electrically neutral atoms creates the van der Waals forces that make liquids and solids possible, the strong force between colorless protons and neutrons creates the nuclear force that binds them into atomic nuclei. This residual force is mediated primarily by particles called pions, which are themselves bound states of a quark and an antiquark. The nuclear force is extraordinarily short-range, effective only over distances of a few femtometers, but within this range it is strong enough to overcome the electromagnetic repulsion between positively charged protons. Atomic nuclei range in size from the single proton of hydrogen to the 208 nucleons of lead, 208, the heaviest stable nucleus. Beyond this, nuclei become unstable, decaying through alpha emission, beta decay, or spontaneous fission. The largest nuclei ever created in laboratories contain over 290 nucleons and exist for only fractions of a second before falling apart. The size of a nucleus scales roughly as the cube root of the number of nucleons. A uranium nucleus, with 238 nucleons, has a diameter of about 15 femtometers, only about 6 times larger than a single proton. This is because nucleons in a nucleus are packed almost as tightly as they can be, limited only by the repulsion of their own quantum wave functions and by the short range of the nuclear force. The density of nuclear matter is staggering, about 230 million metric tons per cubic centimeter. A teaspoon of nuclear matter would weigh more than 1 billion tons. This density is approached in nature only in the cores of neutron stars, collapsed stellar remnants, where gravitational pressure has crushed electrons into protons to form a ball of neutrons a few kilometers across, but containing more mass than the Sun. In such objects, nuclear physics and astrophysics merge, and the equation of state of nuclear matter determines the structure of stars. The atomic nucleus, despite containing more than 99.9% of an atom's mass, occupies only about 1/trillionth of its volume. If the nucleus were the size of a marble at the center of a football stadium, the electrons would be orbiting somewhere in the parking lot. The atom is almost entirely empty space, a fact that astonished physicists when Ernest Rutherford discovered it in 1911 by firing alpha particles at gold foil and watching most of them pass straight through. The forces that bind nuclei together, that determine which combinations of protons and neutrons are stable and which decay, that govern the nuclear reactions powering the Sun, all of these phenomena occur at the femtometer scale. This is the scale of nuclear physics, the the scale where the strong force dominates and the electromagnetic force, while present, plays a secondary role. It is a scale we have learned to exploit for better and worse in nuclear reactors and nuclear weapons. It is also the scale where the heavy elements that make life possible were forged in the cores of massive stars and in the collisions of neutron stars. But we cannot linger here. The atomic nucleus is not the whole atom, and to understand chemistry and life, we must zoom out by a factor of 100,000. We must leave the realm of nuclear physics and enter the realm of atomic physics, where electrons reign supreme and the electromagnetic force determines everything. Before we leave the nucleus behind, however, consider what it represents: the triumph of the strong force over electromagnetism. Protons, all positively charged, should repel each other violently. Two protons at the typical separation within a nucleus experience an electromagnetic repulsion of about 230 newtons, roughly the force needed to lift a 25-pound weight. Yet the strong force, acting through the exchange of pions and other mesons, overcomes this repulsion and binds protons and neutrons together into stable nuclei. This balance is exquisitely delicate. Add too many protons without enough neutrons, and the electromagnetic repulsion wins. The nucleus becomes unstable and undergoes alpha decay, emitting a helium nucleus to reduce its charge. Add too many neutrons without enough protons, and the weak force intervenes. A neutron transforms into a proton through beta decay, restoring the balance. The line of stable nuclei winds through the chart of nuclides like a river through mountains, following the path where the forces achieve equilibrium. The heaviest stable nucleus is Lead 208, with 82 protons and 126 neutrons. Beyond this, all nuclei are radioactive, though some, like uranium-238 with a half-life of 4.5 billion years, are nearly stable on human timescales. The elements heavier than iron can only be created in the most extreme cosmic environments: the cores of massive stars, supernova explosions, neutron star mergers. When two neutron stars collide, they briefly create conditions so extreme that heavy elements form in seconds and are scattered into space. The gold in your wedding ring was forged in such a cataclysm, billions of years before the sun was born. Nuclear physics also explains the energy source of stars. The sun fuses about 600 million tons of hydrogen into helium every second, converting about 4 million tons of mass into energy in the process. This energy, released as gamma rays in the solar core, takes about 200,000 years to random walk its way to the surface, where it emerges as visible light that reaches Earth 8 minutes later. The warmth on your face on a sunny day is nuclear fusion, filtered through a plasma physics particle diffusion process and softened by 8 light minutes of vacuum. Now let us ascend to the atom itself. The atomic scale, atoms and molecules. Ascending from the compact nuclear core, we enter a vast expanse of apparent emptiness that resolves, on closer inspection, into the delicate quantum dance of electrons. This is the atom proper, ranging from about 30 picometers for the smallest hydrogen atom to several hundred picometers for the largest atoms. We have climbed roughly 5 orders of magnitude from the nucleus, from femtometers to angstroms, yet we are still 15 orders of magnitude smaller than a human being. The atom is defined not by its nucleus, which contributes the mass, but by its electron cloud, which contributes the size. Electrons do not orbit the nucleus like tiny planets, despite the popular images. They exist as quantum mechanical probability distributions, three-dimensional standing waves confined by the electromagnetic attraction of the nucleus. The shapes of these distributions, called orbitals, determine the chemistry of each element. The spherical s orbitals, the dumbbell-shaped p orbitals, The cloverleaf d orbitals and the complex f orbitals each hold specific numbers of electrons and give atoms their characteristic bonding properties. The periodic table of elements, that iconic chart hanging in every chemistry classroom, is really a map of electron configurations. Elements in the same column have similar outer electron arrangements and, therefore, similar chemical properties. The noble gases have filled outer shells and rarely react. The alkalis have a single outer electron and react violently. The halogens lack one electron for a complete shell and are aggressive oxidizers. All of chemistry, all of the reactions that build molecules and drive metabolism and power industry, emerges from the quantum mechanics of electron orbitals. There are 92 naturally occurring elements, from hydrogen with 1 proton to uranium with 92. Beyond uranium, elements must be created artificially in nuclear reactors or particle accelerators, and they are increasingly unstable. The heaviest element ever created, oganesson with 118 protons, exists for less than a millisecond before decaying. There may be an island of stability at higher atomic numbers where certain combinations of protons and neutrons achieve extra stability, but this remains speculative. The sizes of atoms do not increase steadily with atomic number. They follow a complex pattern determined by electron shielding and the filling of different orbital types. Cesium, element 55, is actually larger than uranium, element 92. The largest atoms are in the alkali metal family, with loosely held outer electrons that extend far from the nucleus. The smallest atoms are in the noble gas family, with tightly bound complete shells. The range of atomic radii spans only about a factor of 5, from roughly 30 picometers for hydrogen to about 300 picometers for cesium. But atoms rarely exist in isolation. They combine to form molecules, the next level of structural complexity. Molecular bonding comes in several types. Covalent bonds involve the sharing of electrons between atoms, creating strong, directional connections. Ionic bonds involve the transfer of electrons from one atom to another, creating positively and negatively charged ions that attract each other electrostatically. Metallic bonds involve a sea of delocalized electrons shared among many atoms. Van der Waals forces, weaker than true bonds, arise from fluctuating charge distributions and hold molecules together in liquids and solids. The smallest molecule is hydrogen gas, H2, two hydrogen atoms sharing a covalent bond. Its bond length is 74 picometers, smaller than a single atom of most other elements. Water, H2O, is perhaps the most important molecule for life, with a bond angle of 104.5 degrees that gives it its unique properties. The oxygen-hydrogen bonds are about 96 picometers long. As molecules grow larger, they can take on astonishing complexity. Organic chemistry, the chemistry of carbon compounds, produces molecules with hundreds, thousands, or millions of atoms. Carbon's ability to form 4 strong covalent bonds in tetrahedral arrangements allows it to serve as the backbone of enormously complex molecular architectures. Proteins, DNA, cellulose, plastics, pharmaceuticals, and countless other substances all depend on carbon's versatility. Proteins are molecular machines with precise three-dimensional shapes that determine their functions. A typical protein might contain thousands of atoms arranged in a specific folded structure. Hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in your blood, contains over 10,000 atoms. Enzymes, the catalysts that speed up biochemical reactions, have active sites with shapes precisely complementary to their substrate molecules, like locks fitting specific keys. DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, is the molecule of heredity. It consists of 2 polymer chains wound around each other in a double helix, with a diameter of about 2 nanometers. The information is encoded in the sequence of 4 chemical bases: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. The human genome contains about 3 billion base pairs, stretched out in a molecule that would be about 2 meters long if unwound, yet coiled so tightly that it fits inside a cell nucleus only 10 micrometers across. The scale of molecules spans an enormous range. Small molecules like water are under a nanometer in size. Large biological molecules like proteins are tens of nanometers. The largest molecules known, certain synthetic polymers and biological structures like the chromosome of the bacterium Escherichia coli, reach centimeters in length when fully extended, though they are coiled tightly in normal conditions. At this scale, we are still far too small to see with visible light. The wavelength of visible light ranges from about 400 to 700 nanometers, far larger than individual molecules. To image molecules directly, we need electron microscopes, which use electrons with wavelengths 1,000 times shorter than light, or scanning probe microscopes, which feel the surface of samples with atomically sharp tips. In 2009, scientists produced the first direct image of a single molecule, penicillin, showing its 5 linked carbon rings exactly as chemistry predicted. It was a triumph of experimental technique and a vivid confirmation of the atomic theory of matter. The world of atoms and molecules is the world of chemistry, the science that bridges the quantum realm of electrons and nuclei to the macroscopic realm of substances and materials. It is also the foundation of biochemistry and molecular biology, the sciences of life. To understand living things, we must understand molecules. But to understand what makes molecules come alive, we must ascend further to the scale where molecules organize themselves into the intricate machinery of cells. Before we leave the molecular scale, consider the extraordinary precision with which molecular machines operate. Enzymes, the protein catalysts that speed up biochemical reactions, can accelerate reaction rates by factors of 10 million or more while distinguishing between molecules that differ by a single atom. The ribosome, the molecular machine that translates genetic code into proteins, makes fewer than 1 error per 10,000 amino acids added, while operating at speeds of up to 20 amino acids per second. DNA polymerase, the enzyme that copies genetic information, makes fewer than 1 error per billion base pairs copied. These molecular machines achieve precision that would be the envy of any human engineer. The diversity of molecules is essentially infinite. While there are only 92 naturally occurring elements, carbon alone can form millions of distinct compounds. Add in the other common elements of organic chemistry: hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus, and the number of possible molecules becomes astronomical. Drug companies screen millions of compounds, searching for new medicines. Nature has already explored this chemical space far more extensively, producing molecules of breathtaking complexity and subtle function. Consider caffeine, the molecule that may be keeping you awake as you read or watch this. It is a purine alkaloid with the formula CH10N402, containing just 24 atoms arranged in a specific three-dimensional shape. That shape allows caffeine to block adenosine receptors in your brain, preventing the normal accumulation of sleep pressure. A slight modification of caffeine's structure would render it inactive or produce entirely different effects. The shape is everything, and the shape emerges from quantum mechanics, from the electron orbitals that determine how atoms bond. Or consider DNA, the molecule of heredity. Its double helix structure was discovered by James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953, building on X-ray crystallography data from Rosalind Franklin. The two strands are held together by hydrogen bonds between complementary base pairs, adenine with thymine, guanine with cytosine. This pairing rule encodes information. The sequence of bases on one strand determines the sequence on the other. And this information can be copied, read, and translated into proteins, the workhorses of the cell. The genetic code, which translates DNA sequences into protein sequences, is nearly universal across all life on Earth. Bacteria, plants, animals, and fungi all use the same code, with only minor variations. This is powerful evidence that all life shares a common ancestor, a primordial cell that lived over 3.8 billion years ago and used this code to build its proteins. We are all related, all descended from that first self-replicating molecular system. From molecules, we now ascend to the scale of life itself. The scale of life, viruses, bacteria, and cells. We have climbed now to the threshold of life, to the nanometer and micrometer scales where chemistry becomes biology and dead molecules organize themselves into living systems. This is one of the most profound transitions in our journey through the 62 layers, for here we encounter something genuinely new. Complexity that maintains and reproduces itself, patterns that persist against the relentless pressure of entropy. At the boundary between living and non-living stand the viruses, molecular parasites that blur the definition of life itself. A virus is not much more than a package of genetic material, DNA or RNA, wrapped in a protein code. It cannot reproduce on its own. It must hijack the machinery of a living cell, inserting its genetic instructions and forcing the cell to manufacture copies of the virus. Are viruses alive? The question has no definitive answer. They have genes and evolve by natural selection, but they lack the metabolic machinery that characterizes living cells. Viruses come in a remarkable variety of sizes and shapes. The smallest, like the hepatitis D virus, are only about 20 nanometers in diameter, barely larger than a large protein molecule. The largest, like the Mimi viruses discovered in 2003, are 750 nanometers across, larger than some bacteria. Most viruses fall in between, ranging from 20 to 400 nanometers. This puts them at the extreme limit of visibility for light microscopes. They were called viruses, from the Latin word for poison, long before they could be seen, because they caused disease but passed through filters that trapped bacteria. The COVID-19 pandemic brought viruses into global consciousness. The SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus is about 120 nanometers in diameter, with distinctive spike proteins projecting from its surface that give coronaviruses their crown-like appearance. Those spike proteins, each about 20 nanometers long, are the targets of vaccines and the keys that allow the virus to enter human cells. The scale of the pandemic response, the global effort to sequence viral genomes and develop vaccines, was made possible by our mastery of molecular biology, our ability to manipulate matter at the nanometer scale. Above viruses in size come bacteria, the first unambiguously living things on our ascending scale. Bacteria are prokaryotes, single-celled organisms without nuclei or other membrane-bound organelles. They are among the most successful life forms on Earth, found in every environment from Arctic ice to boiling hot springs, from the deepest ocean trenches to the upper atmosphere. There are more bacteria in your gut than there are human cells in your entire body. Typical bacteria range from about 1 to 10 micrometers in length, 1,000 times larger than typical viruses. Escherichia coli, the workhorse of microbiology laboratories, is about 2 micrometers long and 1 micrometer wide, shaped like a tiny rod. Staphylococcus aureus, a common cause of skin infections, is about 1 micrometer in diameter, shaped like a sphere. The smallest known bacteria, belonging to the genus Mycoplasma, are only about 200 nanometers across, barely larger than the largest viruses. Bacteria may be simple compared to the cells of animals and plants, but they are enormously complex compared to anything we have encountered so far. A single E. coli cell contains about 3,000 different types of proteins, each with a specific function. It has a genome of about 4 million base pairs, encoding roughly 4,000 genes. It has a cell membrane that maintains a different chemical environment inside than outside, ribosomes that translate genetic code into proteins, and flagella that propel it through liquid environments. It senses its surroundings, moves toward food and away from toxins, and divides every 20 minutes under ideal conditions. Above bacteria in complexity, though not always in size, come the eukaryotes, organisms whose cells have nuclei and other internal compartments. Eukaryotic cells are generally larger than bacteria, typically 10 to 100 micrometers across, though the range extends from a few micrometers for some yeasts to 135 millimeters for ostrich eggs, which are single cells. The human body contains roughly 37 trillion cells, and they come in hundreds of different types. Neurons, the cells of the nervous system, can extend axons up to a meter long in the case of motor neurons reaching from the spinal cord to the toes. Red blood cells are about 7 micrometers in diameter and have no nucleus, having expelled it to make room for more hemoglobin. White blood cells, the soldiers of the immune system, come in many varieties and can change shape to squeeze through narrow gaps in blood vessel walls. Muscle cells contain specialized proteins that slide past each other to produce contraction. Fat cells store energy in enormous lipid droplets. Each human cell contains the full human genome, about 3 billion base pairs of DNA packaged into 46 chromosomes within a nucleus roughly 6 micrometers in diameter. If you stretched out all the DNA in a single human cell, it would be about 2 meters long. If you stretched out all the DNA in all the cells of a human body, it would reach to the sun and back over 600 times. Yet this vast length of molecular filament is coiled and folded with exquisite precision, wrapped around proteins called histones, organized into structures that allow genes to be read when needed and silenced when not. The cell is not a bag of chemicals, but a highly organized factory, with different processes occurring in different compartments. The nucleus houses the genome. The mitochondria generate energy. The endoplasmic reticulum synthesizes proteins and lipids. The Golgi apparatus packages proteins for export. The cytoskeleton, a network of protein filaments, gives the cell its shape and provides tracks for transporting cargo. All of this machinery runs itself, reads its own blueprints, repairs its own damage, and copies itself when conditions are right. How life arose from non-living chemistry remains one of the greatest unsolved problems in science. Somewhere between 4 billion and 3.8 billion years ago, on a young Earth bombarded by meteorites and devoid of free oxygen, chemistry crossed a threshold into biology. Molecules began to catalyze their own reproduction. Membranes are formed to enclose functional units. Information began to be stored and copied. The details remain murky, but the result was the ancestor of all life on Earth, a population of primitive cells from which every living thing today descends. At the scale of cells, we have reached a remarkable crossover point. Cells are small enough to be governed largely by chemistry and physics, small enough that thermal fluctuations matter and random diffusion delivers molecules to where they are needed. Yet they are large enough to contain the complexity required for life, large enough to house genomes, metabolic networks, and regulatory systems. They are the atoms of biology, the fundamental units from which all complex life is built. The cell is perhaps the most extraordinary object in the known universe. Consider what it does. It maintains itself against the constant pressure of entropy, using energy harvested from its environment to repair damage and replace worn components. It reads its own genome and builds the proteins specified therein. It senses its environment and responds appropriately, moving toward food and away from danger. It grows and divides, producing copies of itself with remarkable fidelity. It communicates with other cells through chemical signals, coordinating collective behaviors. And in some cases, it differentiates, changing its form and function to become part of a larger organism. All of this happens automatically, without central control. There is no tiny engineer inside the cell directing operations. Instead, the cell is a self-organizing system, maintained by the collective interactions of millions of molecules following local rules. Genes encode proteins. Proteins catalyze reactions. Reactions produce and consume molecules. Molecules diffuse through the cell and find their targets. The system maintains itself through feedback loops and regulatory networks of staggering complexity. The energy that powers cells comes ultimately from the sun, captured by photosynthesis and stored in the bonds of organic molecules. Plants and photosynthetic bacteria harvest light energy and use it to split water and fix carbon dioxide into sugars. Animals eat plants or eat other animals that eat plants and break down those organic molecules to release their stored energy. The energy is captured in the form of ADP, adenosine triphosphate, the universal energy currency of life. A typical human cell contains about 1 billion ADP molecules at any moment and turns over its entire ADP supply every 1 to 2 minutes. The information that specifies cells comes from DNA, but the relationship between genotype and phenotype is far from simple. Genes do not directly determine traits. Instead, genes encode proteins. Proteins interact with each other and with other molecules. Those interactions depend on cellular context, and the resulting network dynamics produce phenotypes. Between the gene and the organism lie multiple levels of regulation, from transcription factors that control which genes are expressed to signaling pathways that coordinate cellular behaviors to developmental programs that specify body plans. Life is not a simple readout of genetic information, but an ongoing computation, constantly processing information and making decisions. The origin of cells remains one of the great mysteries of science. Somewhere, somehow, chemistry crossed a threshold into biology. Non-living molecules began to catalyze their own reproduction. Membranes are formed to concentrate reactants and exclude competitors. Information began to be stored, copied, and executed. The first cells were born. This transition may have occurred in deep-sea hydrothermal vents, in shallow tidal pools, in ice sheets, or in some other environment entirely. We may never know the details, because those first cells left no fossils, only the common genetic heritage that links all life on Earth. What we do know is that cells have been on Earth for at least 3.5 billion years, possibly longer. For the first 2 billion years, cells were all prokaryotes, simple bacteria and archaea without nuclei. Then, about 2 billion years ago, a prokaryote engulfed another prokaryote and kept it alive as an internal symbiont. That symbiont became the mitochondrion, the energy-generating organelle found in all eukaryotic cells. A similar event produced the chloroplast, the photosynthetic organelle of plants and algae. Eukaryotic cells are chimeras, mergers of once independent organisms that now function as a single unit. From here, we will continue our ascent to larger scales, where cells combine into organisms and organisms populate worlds. But we should pause to appreciate where we have come from. We began at the Planck length, where space and time themselves dissolve into quantum uncertainty. We climbed through quarks and leptons, protons and neutrons, atoms and molecules. Now we stand at the scale of cells, 10 to the -5 meters, still tiny by human standards, but already enormously complex, already alive. We have traversed 30 orders of magnitude and have 32 more to go. The scale of life, complex organisms, and the human body. Ascending beyond single cells, we enter the realm of complex multicellular life, the realm where billions of cells cooperate to form tissues, organs, and complete organisms. This is the human scale, the scale at which we experience the world directly, the scale that evolution optimized our senses to perceive. Here, at roughly 1 meter, we find ourselves perfectly poised between the quantum realm below and the cosmic realm above. The human body is a marvel of hierarchical organization. Cells combine to form tissues. Tissues combine to form organs. Organs combine to form organ systems. And all of these systems integrate to form a single functioning organism, a conscious being capable of reading these words and contemplating its own existence. Consider the scale progression within your own body. Your red blood cells are about 7 micrometers across. Your muscle fibers are about 50 micrometers in diameter, but can be tens of centimeters long. Your neurons have cell bodies 10 to 50 micrometers across, but axons that extend for centimeters or meters. Your heart is about the size of your fist, roughly 14 centimeters long and 9 centimeters wide. Your largest organ, the skin, spreads about 2 square meters if flattened out. Your small intestine, if unfolded, would cover a tennis court. Your brain, 3 pounds of fatty tissue, contains roughly 86 billion neurons connected by 100 trillion synapses. The range of sizes within multicellular organisms spans about 7 orders of magnitude, from subcellular structures like mitochondria at 1 micrometer to the largest whales at 30 meters. The blue whale, the largest animal ever to exist on Earth, can reach masses of 200 metric tons. At the other extreme, the smallest multicellular animals, certain species of parasitic wasps and free-living rotifers, are only about 150 micrometers long, smaller than some single-celled protists. Plants achieve even greater sizes. The giant sequoia trees of California reach heights of over 90 meters and masses of over 1,000 metric tons. They are the largest single organisms on Earth by volume. The root systems of quaking aspen trees can form connected colonies that spread over hundreds of hectares and persist for thousands of years. One such colony in Utah, called Pando, is estimated to weigh 6 million kilograms and may be over 80,000 years old, making it one of the oldest and heaviest known organisms. But size has its limits. The square cube law dictates that as an organism grows larger, its volume and therefore its weight increase as the cube of its linear dimensions, while its supporting cross-section increases only as the square. This is why insects can have spindly legs relative to their bodies, while elephants need thick columnar legs. It is why the largest land animals, like dinosaurs and elephants, have evolved dense bones and efficient circulatory systems, while the largest marine animals, supported by the buoyancy of water, can reach greater sizes. At the human scale, roughly 1.7 meters for an average adult, we exist at a privileged vantage point. We are large enough that thermal fluctuations and quantum effects average out, giving us a deterministic, predictable world governed by classical physics. Yet we are small enough that we can move through our environment, manipulate objects, and interact with other organisms of similar size. We are large enough to contain the neural circuitry required for consciousness and language, yet small enough to maintain the metabolic rates needed to power these demanding systems. Our senses are tuned to detect phenomena at our scale. Our eyes see electromagnetic radiation with wavelengths between 400 and 700 nanometers, the light that reflects off objects in our environment and allows us to navigate. Our ears hear pressure waves with frequencies between 20 and 20,000 hertz, the sounds produced by footsteps and voices and predators. Our sense of smell detects molecules that have diffused from objects at distances of meters. All of these senses evolved to help organisms of our size survive and reproduce in environments filled with objects and organisms of similar scale. The human body operates through remarkable coordination across scales. Molecular signals trigger cellular responses. Cellular changes affect tissue function. Organ systems regulate each other through hormones and nerve impulses. And all of this integration produces a coherent organism that wakes and sleeps, thinks and dreams, loves and fears. The distance from the smallest functional unit, perhaps a single ion channel in a neural membrane, to the whole behaving organism spans about 6 orders of magnitude. Yet the system functions as a unity, a self that perceives itself as singular despite being composed of trillions of semi-autonomous cells. Death, at the organismal scale, is the failure of this integration. Cells die constantly, replaced by new ones, yet the organism persists. But when the coordinating systems fail, when the heart stops and blood ceases to circulate, the organization that defines life collapses. Within minutes, cells begin to die from oxygen deprivation. Within hours, decomposition begins as bacteria and enzymes break down the intricate molecular structures that maintain order. The organism, which seemed so permanent, so solid, so real, dissolves back into the chemical soup from which it came. The second law of thermodynamics, briefly held at bay by the energetic expenditure of metabolism, reasserts itself. Entropy wins, as it always does. But life goes on. The species continues even as individuals perish. And across geological time, species themselves come and go, replaced by new forms better adapted to changing environments. The tree of life grows new branches while old ones die back. Evolution, operating at the population scale and the geological time scale, sculpts organisms to fit their niches. The human body, for all its complexity, is just one twig on this vast tree, one particular solution to the problem of surviving and reproducing on a rocky planet orbiting a medium-sized star. The human brain deserves special mention at this scale. It is the most complex object known to exist in the universe, a 3-pound organ containing roughly 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others through synapses that can strengthen or weaken based on experience. The total number of synaptic connections in the human brain exceeds the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. This neural network, shaped by millions of years of evolution and decades of individual experience, generates consciousness, the subjective experience of being. How does a physical system produce subjective experience? This is the hard problem of consciousness, and it remains unsolved. We know that consciousness correlates with certain patterns of brain activity. We know that damage to specific brain regions produces specific deficits in consciousness. We know that anesthetics temporarily abolish consciousness by disrupting neural communication. But we do not know why there should be any subjective experience at all, why it should not all be darkness inside, biological machinery operating without anyone home. Perhaps consciousness is not unique to human brains. Perhaps it exists in other animals, in simpler forms, wherever there is sufficient neural complexity. Perhaps it even exists in systems radically different from brains, in artificial intelligences, or in alien life forms we have never encountered. Or perhaps consciousness is a peculiarly human phenomenon, a side effect of our particular evolutionary history that arose in one lineage on one planet and exists nowhere else in the cosmos. We simply do not know. What we do know is that at the human scale, matter has become aware of itself. Atoms have arranged themselves into patterns that can contemplate atoms. The universe has developed eyes to see itself and minds to understand itself. Whatever consciousness is, however it works, its emergence at this scale is one of the most remarkable facts in all of existence. The human scale is also the scale of technology. Our hands, with their opposable thumbs, can grip tools with precision. Our eyes, with their high resolution and color sensitivity, can guide those hands with accuracy. Our brains, with their capacity for language and abstract thought, can plan, design, and iterate. We have used these capabilities to extend our reach far beyond our bodies, building telescopes to see across the cosmos, microscopes to see into cells, and accelerators to probe subatomic particles. We have become a geological force, reshaping the surface of our planet and altering its climate. We have become a biological force, a domesticating species, and spreading across the globe. From this human scale, we now leave biology behind and turn our gaze outward, toward the astronomical realm. We have climbed 35 orders of magnitude from the Planck length, from 10 to the negative 35 meters to 10 to the 0 meters, the meter scale of human bodies. We have 27 orders of magnitude still to go, 27 factors of 10 separating us from the edge of the observable universe. But the journey from here becomes less familiar. We have left the realm of direct experience and entered the realm of instruments and calculations, of telescopes and mathematics. Let us continue upward through planets and stars, through galaxies and superclusters, until we reach the cosmic web itself, that grand architecture of matter that spans the universe. The stellar scale, planets, and our solar system. Leaving the biological realm behind, we ascend to the astronomical scale, where the familiar units of meters and kilometers give way to astronomical units and light years. Here, at scales measured in thousands, millions, and billions of kilometers, we find the first large structures of the cosmos: planets, moons, asteroids, and the stars they orbit. Our solar system is a useful laboratory for understanding planetary scales. At its center sits the Sun, a yellow dwarf star with a diameter of about 1.39 million kilometers. The Sun is so large that roughly 1.3 million Earths could fit inside its volume. Its surface temperature is about 5,500 degrees Celsius, while its core reaches 15 million degrees, hot enough to fuse hydrogen nuclei into helium and release the energy that has warmed our planet for 4.5 billion years. The Sun accounts for 99.86% of all the mass in the solar system. Everything else, all the planets and moons and asteroids and comets, amounts to less than 1/7 of 1%. Jupiter, the largest planet, contains 70% of this remaining mass. Saturn, the second largest, contains most of the rest. The four rocky inner planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, are tiny specks by comparison. Earth, our home, has a diameter of about 12,742 kilometers. This makes it the largest of the rocky planets, but still more than 100 times smaller than Jupiter in diameter and more than 1,000 times smaller in volume. Earth's mass is about 6 trillion kilograms, a number so large as to be meaningless without comparison. The Moon, our only natural satellite, has a diameter of about 1/4 of Earth's and a mass of about 1/18 as much. The distances between planets dwarf their sizes. Mercury, the closest planet to the Sun, orbits at an average distance of about 58 million kilometers. Earth orbits at about 150 million kilometers, a distance we define as 1 astronomical unit for convenience. Mars orbits at about 1.5 astronomical units. Jupiter at 5.2, Saturn at 9.5, Uranus at 19.2, Neptune at 30.1. If you built a scale model of the solar system with the Sun as a beach ball 1 meter in diameter, Earth would be a small bead about 1 centimeter across, orbiting 107 meters away, roughly the length of a football field. The Moon would be an even smaller bead orbiting just 28 centimeters from Earth. Jupiter would be a ball about 10 centimeters across, orbiting 556 meters from the Sun, about 6 football fields. Neptune would be a ball about 3 centimeters across, orbiting over 3 kilometers away. And the nearest star, Proxima Centauri, would be another beach ball about the same size as the Sun, located 28,000 kilometers away, nearly the circumference of the Earth. This scale model illustrates a crucial fact about the solar system. It is almost entirely empty space. If you scattered a handful of sand grains across an area the size of a football field, you would have more objects per unit volume than the solar system has planets per unit volume. The planets are islands of matter in a vast ocean of vacuum, separated by distances that make travel between them an engineering challenge of the highest order. The outer reaches of the solar system extend far beyond Neptune. The Kuiper Belt, a region of icy bodies including Pluto and hundreds of other dwarf planets, extends from about 30 to 50 astronomical units. Beyond that lies the scattered disk, with objects in highly elliptical orbits reaching hundreds of astronomical units from the Sun. And beyond even that, extending perhaps a light year or more, lies the Oort cloud, a hypothetical shell of trillions of icy bodies that occasionally get perturbed into the inner solar system as long-period comets. The edge of the solar system, if defined as the extent of the Sun's gravitational influence, reaches roughly 2 light years, or about 125,000 astronomical units. At this distance, the gravitational pull of nearby stars becomes comparable to the Sun's, and objects can be exchanged between stellar systems. This is truly the frontier, the boundary where our solar system ends and interstellar space begins. Yet even this vast distance, 2 light years, is tiny compared to the scale of the galaxy. The nearest star to the Sun, Proxima Centauri, lies 4.25 light years away. Alpha Centauri A and B, the 2 Sun-like stars that Proxima orbits, are 4.37 light years away. In the scale model where the Sun is a beach ball 1 meter across, these nearest stars would be other beach balls located in Beijing if the Sun beach ball were in London. The galaxy is emptier, in relative terms, than even the solar system. From this solar scale, we now turn to the stars themselves, the nuclear furnaces that light the cosmos. Stars come in an astonishing range of sizes, from tiny red dwarfs barely larger than Jupiter to bloated supergiants that would engulf the orbit of Saturn if placed where the Sun is. Let us explore this stellar zoo. The stellar scale, stars from dwarfs to hypergiants. Stars are the fundamental building blocks of the visible universe. They are the sources of light that allow us to see across cosmic distances, the forges where heavy elements are created, and the engines that drive planetary habitability. They range in size from barely larger than gas giant planets to behemoths that challenge our understanding of stellar physics. At the small end of the stellar scale sit the red dwarfs, stars with masses between about 7 and 50% of the Sun's mass. These are by far the most common type of star, comprising roughly 75% of all stars in the Milky Way. Red dwarfs are small, cool, and dim. Proxima Centauri, the nearest star to the Sun, is a red dwarf with about 12% of the Sun's mass and a diameter of about 200,000 kilometers, roughly 14% of the Sun's diameter. It is so dim that it cannot be seen with the naked eye from Earth, despite being only 4.25 light years away. Red dwarfs burn their hydrogen fuel slowly and steadily, giving them enormous lifespans. A star like Proxima Centauri could continue fusing hydrogen for trillions of years, hundreds of times longer than the current age of the universe. Because the universe is only 13.8 billion years old, no red dwarf has yet had time to exhaust its fuel. Every red dwarf that ever formed is still shining today. At the opposite extreme lie the most massive stars, blue giants and supergiants with masses up to 150 times the Sun's mass or more. These stars are intensely luminous, shining millions of times brighter than the Sun, but they burn through their fuel rapidly, living only a few million years. R136A1, one of the most massive known stars, has about 215 solar masses packed into a star roughly 30 to 40 times the Sun's diameter. It produces energy at a rate roughly 8.7 million times faster than the Sun, placing it among the most luminous stars known. But mass does not always correlate with size. When massive stars exhaust the hydrogen in their cores, they evolve into red supergiants, expanding to enormous diameters while their surface temperatures drop. Betelgeuse, in the constellation Orion, has a diameter roughly 700 times that of the Sun. If placed at the center of our solar system, its surface would extend beyond the orbit of Mars. Yet despite this vast size, Betelgeuse has only about 15 to 20 solar masses. It is enormously distended, less dense on average than Earth's atmosphere at sea level. The largest known stars are the red hypergiants, even more bloated than supergiants. UY Scuti, in the constellation Scutum, has a radius estimated at around 900 to 1,700 times that of the Sun, depending on the measurement method. If placed in our solar system, its surface would extend beyond the orbit of Jupiter or even the asteroid belt. Yet for all its size, UY Scuti has only about 7 to 10 solar masses. It is so diffuse that a cubic meter of its outer atmosphere contains fewer particles than a good laboratory vacuum on Earth. Another contender for the largest known star is Stephenson 2-18, with an estimated radius over 2,000 times that of the Sun. These measurements are difficult to make precisely because such stars are far away. Their surfaces are fuzzy and variable, and they are shrouded in shells of expelled material. The title of largest known star changes every few years as better observations refine our estimates. At the dense extreme, after massive stars die, they can leave behind neutron stars, the collapsed cores of supernova explosions. A neutron star contains 1 to 2 solar masses compressed into a sphere only about 20 kilometers across. The density is staggering. A teaspoon of neutron star material would weigh about 6 billion tons. The surface gravity is about 200 billion times Earth's gravity. If you dropped an object from a height of 1 meter above a neutron star, it would hit the surface traveling at about 7 million kilometers per hour. Even more extreme are black holes, regions of space where matter has collapsed to such density that not even light can escape. The smallest known stellar mass black holes have about 3 to 5 solar masses compressed into an event horizon only about 18 to 30 kilometers in diameter. Supermassive black holes at the centers of galaxies can contain billions of solar masses within event horizons billions of kilometers across. The black hole at the center of the Milky Way, called Sagittarius A*, contains about 4 million solar masses within an event horizon about 12 million kilometers in diameter, slightly less than the diameter of Mercury's orbit. The physics of stellar interiors drives their evolution through predictable stages. Main sequence stars fuse hydrogen into helium in their cores, balancing the inward pull of gravity against the outward pressure of radiation. When the hydrogen runs out, the core contracts and heats up, allowing helium fusion to begin. Successive stages of fusion create heavier elements: carbon, oxygen, neon, and silicon. For the most massive stars, this continues until iron accumulates in the core. Iron fusion consumes energy rather than releasing it, so the core collapses catastrophically, producing a supernova explosion and leaving behind either a neutron star or a black hole. These stellar deaths seed the universe with heavy elements. Every atom in your body heavier than hydrogen and helium was forged inside a star. The carbon in your cells was produced by red giants. The oxygen you breathe came from massive stars that exploded millions of years before the sun formed. The gold in your jewelry was produced in neutron star collisions, the most violent explosions in the universe. You are quite literally made of stardust, assembled from the ashes of stellar explosions. This process of stellar nucleosynthesis is one of the most profound discoveries of 20th century science. In 1957, a landmark paper by Margaret Burbidge, Geoffrey Burbidge, William Fowler, and Fred Hoyle laid out the processes by which elements are created in stars. They showed how hydrogen fuses into helium in main sequence stars, how helium fuses into carbon through the triple alpha process in red giants, how carbon, oxygen, and heavier elements are built up through successive fusion stages in massive stars, and how elements heavier than iron are created in supernova explosions and neutron star mergers through rapid neutron capture. This means that stars are not just objects to be observed. They are factories, cosmic foundries that transform the simple raw materials of the universe, hydrogen and helium, into the complex elements needed for planets and life. Without stellar nucleosynthesis, there would be no carbon, no oxygen, no silicon, no iron. The universe would be a boring place of hydrogen clouds, with no possibility for chemistry or biology. We owe our existence to generations of stars that lived and died before the sun was born. The life cycle of a star is a constant battle between gravity, which tries to collapse the star, and pressure, which resists collapse. In main sequence stars, the pressure comes from radiation produced by nuclear fusion. When fusion runs out, the star loses this support and begins to collapse. Depending on its mass, the collapse may halt at the density of white dwarfs, neutron stars, or not at all, producing black holes. Each of these endpoints represents a different balance between gravity and quantum mechanical pressure. White dwarfs are supported by electron degeneracy pressure, a quantum mechanical effect that prevents electrons from being squeezed into the same state. This pressure is independent of temperature, so white dwarfs can cool forever without collapsing further. But electron degeneracy pressure has a limit. If a white dwarf accumulates mass beyond about 1.4 solar masses, the Chandrasekhar limit, even electron degeneracy pressure cannot support it. The white dwarf collapses and typically explodes as a Type I supernova, one of the brightest explosions in the universe. These explosions are so consistent in their luminosity that astronomers use them as standard candles to measure distances across the cosmos. Neutron stars are supported by neutron degeneracy pressure, a similar quantum mechanical effect, but for neutrons. This pressure is stronger than electron degeneracy pressure, allowing neutron stars to support more mass in a smaller space. But neutron degeneracy pressure also has a limit. If a neutron star accumulates mass beyond about 2 to 3 solar masses, nothing can stop its collapse, and it becomes a black hole. Black holes are the ultimate endpoints of stellar evolution, objects so dense that not even light can escape their gravitational pull. The event horizon of a black hole is not a physical surface, but a mathematical boundary. Once inside, nothing can return to the outside universe. At the center of a black hole lies a singularity, a point where our current theories predict infinite density and infinite curvature of space-time. This is almost certainly a sign that our theories are incomplete, that some new physics of quantum gravity must resolve the singularity into something less paradoxical. But we do not yet know what that physics is. From individual stars, we now ascend to the next level of cosmic organization, Galaxies, the vast collections of billions or trillions of stars bound together by gravity. The cosmic scale, galaxies, and the Milky Way. At around 100,000 light-years in scale, we encounter the first truly cosmic structures, galaxies. These immense collections of stars, gas, dust, and dark matter are the basic units of cosmic architecture, the nodes in the vast network that structures the universe. The Milky Way, our home galaxy, is a barred spiral galaxy containing somewhere between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. Its disk is approximately 100,000 light-years in diameter and about 1,000 light-years thick in the spiral arms, thickening to about 10,000 light-years at the central bulge. If you could view it from outside, it would appear as a bright central region surrounded by sweeping spiral arms adorned with pink star-forming regions and dark dust lanes. Our Sun lies about 26,000 light-years from the galactic center, roughly 2/3 of the way from the center to the edge of the disk. We orbit the galactic center at a speed of about 220 kilometers per second, taking roughly 225 to 250 million years to complete one orbit, a period sometimes called a cosmic year or galactic year. The Sun has completed perhaps 18 to 20 orbits since it formed 4.6 billion years ago. The last time our solar system was in its current position in the galaxy, dinosaurs were just beginning to diversify. The spiral arms are not fixed structures, but density waves, like ripples in a cosmic pond. Stars pile up as they pass through these waves, and the compression of interstellar gas triggers star formation. The bright blue stars that outline the spiral arms are young and massive, living fast and dying young. By the time they could travel far from their birthplaces, they had already exploded as supernovae. This is why spiral arms appear blue while galactic bulges appear yellow or red. The bulges contain old, long-lived stars, while the arms are continuously refreshed with bright young ones. At the very center of the Milky Way lurks Sagittarius A*, a supermassive black hole with a mass of about 4 million suns. We cannot see this black hole directly, but we can observe stars orbiting it, including one called S2 that completes an orbit in just 16 years, swooping within about 120 astronomical units of the event horizon. These observations, combined with the 2019 imaging of the black hole shadow in the galaxy M87 and the subsequent 2022 image of Sagittarius A* itself, have confirmed that supermassive black holes exist at the centers of most, if not all, major galaxies. Beyond the Milky Way, the universe contains at least 2 trillion galaxies and possibly far more beyond our observational horizon. These galaxies come in several types. Elliptical galaxies are smooth, football-shaped collections of old stars with little gas or ongoing star formation. Spiral galaxies like the Milky Way have disks, bulges, and spiral arms. Irregular galaxies have chaotic shapes, often the result of gravitational interactions with other galaxies. The nearest major galaxy to the Milky Way is the Andromeda Galaxy, also known as M31, approximately 2.5 million light-years away. Andromeda is larger than the Milky Way, containing perhaps 1 trillion stars, and is approaching us at about 110 kilometers per second. In about 4.5 billion years, the Milky Way and Andromeda will collide and merge, eventually forming a single giant elliptical galaxy that some astronomers have nicknamed Milkomeda or Milkdromeda. Galaxy collisions, despite the violence of the name, are surprisingly gentle for individual stars. The distances between stars are so vast compared to stellar sizes that direct collisions between stars are extremely rare. When galaxies merge, their stars pass through each other like 2 clouds of gnats combining into one swarm. The gas, however, can collide and compress, triggering massive bursts of star formation. Galactic mergers are dramatic events that reshape their participants over hundreds of millions of years. Galaxies range enormously in size. The smallest dwarf galaxies contain only a few 100 million stars and span only a few thousand light-years. The largest giant elliptical galaxies contain trillions of stars and span millions of light-years. IC 1101, one of the largest known galaxies, has a diameter of approximately 4 million light-years, 40 times larger than the Milky Way. It contains about 100 trillion stars, 1,000 times more than our galaxy. Surrounding most galaxies is a halo of dark matter, an invisible substance that outweighs the visible matter by roughly 5 to 1. Dark matter reveals itself only through its gravitational effects. It holds galaxies together, bends light around galaxy clusters, and leaves its imprint on the cosmic microwave background. We do not know what dark matter is, only that it exists. It may be an undiscovered particle, a modification of gravity, or something stranger still. This ignorance is one of the great embarrassments of modern physics. Most of the matter in the universe is made of something we cannot identify. The evidence for dark matter is overwhelming and comes from multiple independent lines of observation. Galaxy rotation curves show that stars in the outer regions of spiral galaxies orbit faster than they should if only visible matter were present. Galaxy clusters contain too little visible mass to hold together gravitationally. Without dark matter, they would fly apart. The cosmic microwave background shows fluctuations with a specific pattern that requires dark matter to explain. Gravitational lensing, the bending of light by massive objects, reveals dark matter even when no visible matter is present. All of these observations point to the same conclusion. Most of the mass in the universe is invisible. What could dark matter be? The leading candidates are weakly interacting massive particles, or WIMPs, hypothetical particles that interact through gravity and perhaps the weak force, but not through electromagnetism or the strong force. WIMPs would be stable, abundant, and nearly impossible to detect directly, matching the observed properties of dark matter. Despite decades of searching, however, no WIMP has ever been detected. Other candidates include axions, sterile neutrinos, and primordial black holes, but none of these has been confirmed either. Some physicists have proposed modifying gravity instead of postulating dark matter. These modified gravity theories, such as MOND, modified Newtonian dynamics, can explain galaxy rotation curves without dark matter. But they struggle to explain other observations, particularly the cosmic microwave background and the dynamics of galaxy clusters. At present, the dark matter hypothesis remains the most widely accepted explanation, even though we do not know what dark matter actually is. Galaxies also harbor another mystery: dark energy. This is not a component of galaxies, but rather a property of space itself, an energy that fills empty space and drives the accelerating expansion of the universe. Dark energy accounts for about 68% of the total energy content of the cosmos. Dark matter accounts for about 27%. Ordinary matter, the stuff of stars and planets and people, accounts for less than 5%. We live in a universe dominated by things we cannot see and do not understand. The history of galaxies is a history of growth through mergers and accretion. Small galaxies form first, then collide and merge to form larger ones. The Milky Way has absorbed dozens of smaller galaxies over its history, and its halo contains the debris of these cosmic meals, streams of stars that preserve the orbits of their parent galaxies. This process of hierarchical assembly continues today. Satellite galaxies like the Sagittarius dwarf are currently being torn apart by the Milky Way's gravity, their stars stretched into long tidal streams that wrap around our galaxy. From the scale of individual galaxies, we now ascend to the largest structures in the universe: galaxy clusters, superclusters, filaments, and the cosmic web itself. The cosmic scale, superclusters, filaments, and the observable universe. As we reach the final rungs of our cosmic ladder, the universe reveals its grandest architecture. At scales of hundreds of millions to billions of light years, galaxies are not scattered randomly, but organized into a vast web-like structure of filaments, walls, and voids. This is the cosmic web, the skeleton of the universe. Galaxies cluster together under mutual gravitational attraction. The Milky Way belongs to a small collection called the Local Group, which contains over 50 galaxies spanning about 10 million light-years. The Local Group includes the Andromeda Galaxy, the Triangulum Galaxy, and numerous smaller dwarf galaxies that orbit the larger members. The Local Group is itself part of a larger structure called the Virgo supercluster, centered on the massive Virgo cluster about 50 million light-years away. The Virgo cluster contains over 1,000 galaxies bound together by gravity, including several giant elliptical galaxies that have grown fat by cannibalizing smaller neighbors over billions of years. In 2014, astronomers mapped an even larger structure called Laniakea, the Hawaiian word for immense heaven. Laniakea is a supercluster spanning over 500 million light-years and containing about 100,000 galaxies, including the Milky Way. Galaxies within Laniakea are flowing toward a region called the Great Attractor, a gravitational anomaly hidden behind the plane of the Milky Way. But Laniakea is not the largest structure. Superclusters themselves are organized into filaments, long chains of galaxies stretching across hundreds of millions of light-years. These filaments surround enormous voids, regions of space largely devoid of galaxies that can span hundreds of millions of light-years across. The universe resembles a vast cosmic sponge, with matter concentrated on the surfaces of bubbles and emptiness within. The largest known structures are the galaxy walls, flattened sheets of superclusters and filaments. The Sloan Great Wall, discovered in 2003, spans about 1.4 billion light-years. The Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall, identified in 2013 through observations of gamma-ray bursts, may span 10 billion light-years, though its existence remains controversial. At scales larger than about 300 million light-years, the universe becomes homogeneous. The lumps and voids average out, and matter is distributed uniformly in all directions. This is called the end of greatness, the scale above which there are no more structures, just a smooth distribution of matter punctuated by random fluctuations. The cosmic web is the largest pattern in nature. How did this structure form? The answer lies in the early universe. The cosmic microwave background, the oldest light in the cosmos, shows tiny temperature fluctuations of about 1 part in 100,000. These fluctuations correspond to slight differences in density in the early universe, variations seeded by quantum fluctuations during cosmic inflation and amplified over billions of years by gravity. Regions slightly denser than average attracted more matter and grew denser still. Regions slightly less dense lost matter to their neighbors and became voids. Dark matter played a crucial role in this process. Because dark matter does not interact with light, it could begin clumping immediately after the universe cooled enough for matter to dominate over radiation. Ordinary matter, still coupled to light, was prevented from collapsing by radiation pressure. When the universe became transparent about 380,000 years after the Big Bang, ordinary matter found that dark matter had already created gravitational wells for it to fall into. This is why galaxies formed where they did, in the web of dark matter filaments that had already assembled. Computer simulations of cosmic structure formation reproduced the observed cosmic web with impressive accuracy. starting from initial conditions derived from the cosmic microwave background and running forward through billions of years of gravitational dynamics. These simulations produce virtual universes that match the real one in statistical detail. This agreement is one of the triumphs of modern cosmology. At the outer limit of our observations sits the edge of the observable universe, approximately 46 billion light-years away in any direction. This is not a physical edge, but a horizon, the distance light has traveled since the Big Bang. Beyond this horizon, there is almost certainly more universe, possibly infinite in extent, but light from those regions has not had time to reach us. We see the universe as it was, not as it is, and the most distant objects we can observe show us conditions as they were over 13 billion years ago. The observable universe contains roughly 2 trillion galaxies, 100 billion trillion stars, and perhaps 10 times that many planets. If even a tiny fraction of those planets harbor life, the universe teems with it. If we are alone, then the observable universe is a vast, empty cathedral with us as its only congregation. The observable universe has a diameter of about 93 billion light-years, or roughly 8.8 times 10 to the 26th meters. From the Planck length of 1.6 times 10 to the negative 35th meters to this cosmic horizon, we have traversed 62 orders of magnitude, 62 factors of 10, 62 layers of reality. But here is something even more extraordinary to consider. The universe beyond our observable horizon may be vastly larger still. Theoretical models suggest that the full universe, if it is finite at all, could be at least 250 times larger than the observable portion. Some models of cosmic inflation predict a universe so large that the distance to its edge, if it has one, would be written with more zeros than there are atoms in the observable universe. And some physicists speculate that our universe may be just one bubble in an infinite multiverse, an eternal inflation spawning universe after universe in an endless cosmic foam. If this is true, then 62 orders of magnitude are just a tiny sample of a possibly infinite range of scales. What lies beyond the cosmic horizon? We cannot know directly, because light from those regions can never reach us. But we can make educated guesses based on the assumption that the universe looks roughly the same everywhere, the cosmological principle that has guided cosmology for a century. If we could teleport to the edge of our observable universe, we would find ourselves at the center of a new observable universe, overlapping with ours, but containing regions we can never see from Earth. And an observer there would say the same thing about their horizon. The observable universe is not a special place in the cosmos. It is just the piece of the cosmos we can access. This raises profound questions about the nature of existence. If there are regions of the universe forever beyond our reach, do those regions really exist in any meaningful sense? If the multiverse is real, can we ever test that hypothesis scientifically? At what point does physics shade into metaphysics, into questions that cannot be answered by observation and experiment? These are the deep waters where science meets philosophy, where the limits of knowledge become the limits of thought itself, the profound unity of scale. And so we arrive at the end of our journey, having traversed the full range of known scales in the universe. From the quantum foam of the Planck length to the cosmic web of the observable universe, we have climbed 62 rungs on the ladder of existence. What have we learned? First, we have learned that the universe is hierarchical. Structure builds upon structure, layer upon layer. Quarks combine to form protons and neutrons. Protons and neutrons combine to form atomic nuclei. Nuclei and electrons combine to form atoms. Atoms combine to form molecules. Molecules combine to form cells. Cells combine to form organisms. Stars combine to form galaxies. Galaxies combine to form clusters and superclusters. At each level, new phenomena emerge that could not be predicted from the properties of the components alone. This emergence is one of the deepest mysteries in all of science. How does quantity become quality? How do simple rules, applied to vast numbers of components, produce complexity that transcends the components themselves? The laws of physics do not change from one scale to another. Quarks obey the same quantum mechanics whether they are inside a proton or inside a star. Electrons follow the same rules whether they are in a single atom or in a superconductor containing trillions of atoms. Yet the behaviors that emerge at larger scales are qualitatively new. Superconductivity is not a property of individual electrons. Consciousness is not a property of individual neurons. These are collective phenomena, properties of systems that exist only when the systems are large enough and organized in the right way. Second, we have learned that the universe is mostly empty. At every scale, from atoms to solar systems to galaxies to the cosmic web, the actual matter is concentrated in tiny pockets separated by vast gulfs of nothing. If you removed all the empty space from the atoms in your body, you would compress down to a speck smaller than a grain of sand. If you removed all the empty space between stars, galaxies would shrink to invisibility. The universe is a sparse place, a few specks of matter floating in an ocean of vacuum. Yet this emptiness is not nothing. The vacuum of space seethes with virtual particles, quantum fluctuations that pop in and out of existence too quickly to observe directly, but that have measurable effects on real particles. The vacuum has energy, an energy density that may be driving the accelerating expansion of the universe. Empty space is not empty. It is a subtle, active medium with properties we are only beginning to understand. Third, we have learned that our position in the cosmic hierarchy is remarkable. We exist at the exact midpoint between the Planck length and the observable universe, at the scale where chemistry becomes possible, where complexity can emerge, where consciousness can arise. This may be a coincidence, or it may be a selection effect. Perhaps only at this scale can observers exist to contemplate their position. Either way, it is worth noting. We are not at the edge of the cosmos, but at its heart, balanced between the infinitesimally small and the incomprehensibly large. Some physicists call this the anthropic principle, the observation that the universe must have properties compatible with the existence of observers, because otherwise no one would be here to observe it. This is either a profound insight or a trivial tautology, depending on how it is interpreted. At its weakest, the anthropic principle just says that we should not be surprised to find ourselves in a universe that can support our existence. At its strongest, it suggests that the universe was somehow designed or selected to produce observers, a claim that steps outside science into religion or philosophy. The debate continues, and the resolution, if there is one, lies in the future. Fourth, we have learned that the universe is comprehensible. Despite spanning 62 orders of magnitude, the cosmos is governed by a handful of fundamental laws that apply at all scales. Quantum mechanics governs the behavior of particles. General relativity governs the behavior of spacetime. The Standard Model describes the fundamental forces. With these tools, we can understand phenomena from the quark to the quasar, from the first microsecond after the Big Bang to the heat-death trillions of years hence. This comprehensibility is itself astonishing. There is no reason the universe had to be understandable by beings evolved to survive on an African savanna. Yet it is. The mathematics we developed to count sheep and divide grain turns out to describe the structure of space-time and the behavior of subatomic particles. The intuitions we evolved to throw rocks and avoid predators can be extended, with effort, to visualize black holes and quantum fields. Eugene Wigner, the great physicist, called this the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences. Why should abstract mathematical structures, invented by human minds for human purposes, turn out to describe the fundamental nature of reality? Why should the universe be lawful at all, rather than chaotic and arbitrary? These questions have no agreed-upon answers. They point to something deep about the relationship between mind and cosmos, something we do not yet understand. We are the universe looking back at itself, trying to understand its own nature. We are matter that has organized itself into patterns complex enough to contemplate their own existence. We are stardust that knows it is stardust. In a cosmos of 2 trillion galaxies and 10 sextillion stars, on a small rocky planet orbiting an unremarkable star in the outer suburbs of an ordinary spiral galaxy, matter has become aware. This awareness is precious and, as far as we know, rare. We have searched for signs of intelligent life beyond Earth and found none. The universe appears silent, empty, dead. Perhaps life is common, but intelligence is rare. Perhaps intelligence is common, but technology leaves no observable signatures. Perhaps the distances between civilizations are simply too vast for communication. Or perhaps, most hauntingly, we are alone, the only minds in a cosmos so vast that our light will never reach another pair of eyes. If we are alone, then our responsibility is immense. We are the only witnesses to the cosmic drama, the only beings who can appreciate its beauty and understand its laws. If we destroy ourselves, through war or environmental catastrophe or careless technology, the universe loses its only known audience. The stars will continue to burn, the galaxies will continue to evolve, but no one will be watching. No one will care. This is the meaning of the 62 layers. Not that we are small and insignificant, though by cosmic standards we are, but that we are made of the cosmos, connected to it at every scale, products of its laws and processes. The atoms in your body were forged in stars. The elements that make up your DNA were scattered by supernovae. The planet you stand on formed from the debris of ancient stellar explosions. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself. The calcium in your bones came from exploding white dwarfs. The iron in your blood was fused in the cores of massive stars. The oxygen you breathe was released by ancient algae 3 billion years ago. The water you drink has been cycling through the earth for 4 billion years, passing through clouds and oceans and the bodies of countless organisms before reaching your lips. You are a temporary arrangement of matter and energy, a pattern in the cosmic flow, an eddy in the river of time. But what a pattern you are. In a universe that appears mostly dead, you are alive. In a cosmos of mindless physical law, you are conscious. In an existence dominated by empty space and cold vacuum, you are warm and thinking and feeling. You are the rarest thing we know of, a piece of the universe that knows it exists. As you go about your day after watching this, remember what you carry with you. Remember that your body contains more atoms than there are stars in the observable universe. Remember that you are balanced at the exact center of the cosmic scale. Remember that every proton in your cells has existed since the first microseconds after the Big Bang, recycled through generations of stars and planets to arrive here, now, in you. The universe has 62 layers, and you are made of all of them. Think about that the next time you feel small or insignificant. You are not small. You are precisely the right size to exist at the boundary between the quantum and the cosmic, the only scale where matter can organize itself into beings capable of asking why it exists at all. You are not insignificant. You are the universe's way of knowing itself, the cosmos condensed into a form that can contemplate the cosmos. The journey we have taken tonight, from the Planck length to the observable universe, is more than a tour of physical scales. It is a meditation on existence, a reminder of the extraordinary fact that anything exists at all. Why is there something rather than nothing? This is the ultimate question, the question that lies beneath all other questions, and we do not have an answer. Perhaps we never will. But the fact that we can ask the question, the fact that the universe has produced beings who wonder about their own origins, is itself a kind of answer, or at least a hint. The universe exists. You exist. That is the first and greatest miracle, the foundation upon which all other miracles are built. If this journey has inspired you, if it has given you a new perspective on your place in the cosmos, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of how extraordinary existence is. Leave a comment telling me which scale fascinated you most: the quantum foam, the molecular machinery of life, the stellar explosions, or the cosmic web. What questions do you have about the scales we explored? What did I miss that you would like to know more about? The exploration of scale is never complete. New discoveries await at every level, from the quantum gravity regime below the Planck length to the cosmic structures beyond our current horizon. The next generation of telescopes and particle accelerators will probe scales we cannot yet access. The next generation of theories will unify quantum mechanics and gravity, perhaps revealing new layers of reality we have not imagined. The universe is not finished revealing its secrets. Until next time, keep looking up at the stars and keep looking down at the atoms. The universe is waiting to be explored in both directions. The 62 layers are yours to discover. This has been a journey through the 62 layers of reality. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing this moment of cosmic contemplation with me.